Arguably one of the most feared forces in women's football over the last 5 years are Catalonian giants Barcelona. But have they been able to stay this dominant and this consistent for this long? Let's talk about it. Having reached new heights by winning the Champions League back in 2021 after beating Chelsea, they went on to reach yet another final in the last campaign, but fell short against a very dynamite Lyon. Back in Spain, they have continued a perfect record from last season. In fact, they have won the last 48 games in a row since last June in Liga F. Part of the secret recipe is this beautiful yet dynamite style of play and tactics that they implement on the pitch. The majority of their games are set up in a 4-3-3 formation, with the starting 11 being relatively consistent this season, given the fact that Alexia Putellas is out with an ACL injury. The team is not short of quality or young talent, as the bench is usually just as dynamite and just as dangerous for the puzzle as the starting 11. Like I discussed in an earlier video, which I recommend you check out, I break down how Barcelona presses. A huge value of that is possessional play and playing with the 6-second rule, meaning that they retain possession after losing it within 6 seconds. Taking a closer look at that possession, it is mainly maintained in the middle of the pitch. That's followed by the opposition half of the pitch, and then at the end of the list is actually their own half of the pitch. Barcelona almost always play from the back. In fact, that's really important to how they maintain possession and dictate that pace of the game. Paredes, when necessary, is able to push up high and kind of provide more options for the center backs that are playing very close to her on both sides. You then have the fullbacks that are playing very, very far. And when I mean very far, I mean they're almost literally hugging the touchline. And to better illustrate how this actually really looks like when they're on the pitch, you can see over here they are trying to build from the back. This is directly from a goal kick that was given a pass to Mappy Lyon. The captain herself has pulled up a little bit higher than the usual position of being right beside Mappy Lyon, but you can see Mappy Lyon with the ball is going over to Rolfo, who is playing as a fullback or specifically as a left back in that game against Bayern. I want you to take a really close look here to see how close Rolfo is to that touchline. Even though she was possessing a role as a fullback, she could have had the opportunity to drop in a little bit lower. She could have also had the opportunity to drop in a lot lower when the goal kick was being taken, and she could have been as an option straight from the goalie. But that's not how Barcelona plays. They always require the fullbacks to be very, very spread out when a goal kick is taking place or when they're building from the back. On top of the fullbacks being very, very far wide, they also have a defensive midfielder drop in, and this really helps when they're kind of under pressure or trying to break the press of the other team. And what this forms is almost this kind of like W shape of passes, which allows Barcelona to break the other's press very calmly and have a lot of patience in their passes. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to drag the opposition out of position. This can be very frustrating for the opponent, as imagine trying to press and sending in a lot of bodies inside, and then you have this team moving the ball in kind of a W shape. It gets really, really frustrating, which will open up a space, could be directly to one of the midfielders or straight to the wingers. Let's say we have a winger that is running up there, and so with one or two passes, the ball's already moved forward and the ball's already in the opposition's half. Now, this pass is very important, and if you look at their pass percentages and their pass completions, they're sitting top of the Liga F, which means they depend so high on a single or two passes because, as you can see here, that could be game-changing. If the opposition is pressing well, and what I mean by that is that they are covering the midfield very well, which we saw in the Bayern game in the second leg of the Champions League, Barcelona will likely struggle to find that kind of dynamite pass or that pass that will change that possession to be not so much in the middle bit of the field, but rather a little bit higher. That midfield coverage is going to cause a lot of troubles, and also it's going to require this little guy, the 9, the striker, to drop in a little bit lower and kind of help distract whoever is covering in that midfield. Once they've established that momentum, once they've established a build-up moment, they set up in what we see as a 2-3-2-3 formation. Looking at another exhibit here in the same Barcelona-Bayern game, which I highly recommend you go watch because every single Barcelona principle and core ideology that they try to play was executed perfectly in this game. So I will be referring to a lot of moments that happened in this game, but I do recommend you go and watch the entirety of it. They've established that they're moving forward and that they are in a building up moment, which why you can see they are very high up the pitch. I mean, they're literally almost on the half touchline there. But in this moment, they are set up in a 2-3-2-3 formation. Another moment in the second half, again, they're playing very high and they are set up in a 2-3-2-3 formation. The last one I want to show here is that they start this 2-3-2-3 build up very early on. And if you remember this goal, it is the Pina goal against Bayern Munich. That third goal, absolutely sensational. You can tell they're being pressed, but they hold so rigidly to that 2-3. I mean, Bronze is a little bit kind of further behind, but that 2-3-2-3 formation. And you need to go back and watch that goal. It's beautiful. It allows so many passes. It allows so many different moments of movement. And what I mean by that is when they set up like this, they have so much coverage of that field. And I'm going to take this bit a little bit further away. They move in such an incredible unit. I mean, you can tell they're so kind of close to each other, yet you can see all these kind of points and moments. They are able to cover that. And most importantly, they have really good side-to-side coverage, right? You can tell all these moments here, side to side, they're relatively covered by at least one or two players, and that helps switch the play a lot more easier than otherwise would. And a great question that comes around when we're talking about building from the back and having that kind of 2-3-2-3 setup is that they don't concede many goals. And that's a really important question that not many people talk about. Building out from the back opens a lot of opportunities if you're being pressed to kind of cause a blunder in the back and really concede a fair amount of goals. But Barcelona don't have that. In fact, they've conceded the least amount of goals in League F this season. Weirdly enough, they are the least pressed team this season, which makes you wonder if they build up from the back and that is something that can be exploited. Why do teams not want to cover that midfield and not want to press them aggressively? A plausible answer to this is because they cover up so much of the field when they build up and they have that kind of switch from left to right. It makes pressing them very difficult and in fact probably puts you at a weaker and at a disadvantage than if you didn't press. Because they know they will leave patches further behind that Barcelona will somehow also exploit. When securing, entering that opposition and having that final third that we often speak about, the wingers play very, very wide. The striker is going to stay in that central area and they're going to have two of the midfielders pull up high, which means literally every single time they're in a forward movement, they almost always have at least 5 options up top, which is very scary for any defensive line to come up against. Taking a closer look here, you can tell you have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 options here. It's because you've got the wingers, you've got the midfielders, and you've got the striker all in the mix beside each other. Another great example of options and having plenty of bodies in the box is this great example that actually led to a goal from Aitana Bonmati. Wolfo has the ball here, and she's got 1, 2, 3, 4, and herself being the 5th person up there as an option. And you can see the two, I'm just going to erase these here, you can tell that there's 2 midfielders up in there and it's eventually a midfielder that finishes that ball. Again, another one that I want to show, you've got 2 midfielders up in here, the striker and the wingers, 5 options up there, and really they're almost always playing against 4 or 5 defenders. So here they've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Really, a lot of the times in this game they ended up in a 5v4 position, which if you're going up against Barcelona, you certainly don't want to be a man down defending when they're going forward. Now, before they're able to kind of set up that 5 players up here, teams are going to line up in kind of a low block to avoid that from happening, which can show you that there's almost always a middle of the pitch congestion. This is where you have the 2 midfielders play kind of parallel to each other, but also against each other. So if one is drawing or dropping a little bit further back, the other one is pulling forward to help that eventually have 5 of them up there. For example, let's say Aitana Bonmati drops deep. She's going to take down at least one of the midfielders. This creates a lot of space for, let's say, Rolfo to drop into. And this works great. As one drops deep, another one pushes up. And so you've almost got another 3 players right beside each other only because Walsh dragged down a player. You've got plenty of chances in the wing over here. Already, you've got 4 players in attack. Naturally, trying to defend against those 2 players, either the fullback drops in deep, which again will leave that flank be a lot more exposed, or that center back is also going to drop in and cover, which will leave this pocket a little bit exposed. And so this box-to-box movement that you almost always see in the midfield is so crucial to opening up spaces that it almost always happens too fast where you can't even keep up with them, which you can almost try to imagine being in the opposition and trying to defend against that. You're trying to cover and you're trying to mark, which is what defenders are taught and what they learn, but at the same time you open so many other spaces purely because there's 2 units working together, yet they're working against each other. This danger is also present when they do have that ball on the wings and they're able to either cross in or have an overlap position take place. Either they underlap or overlap. Like we've demonstrated before, there's always enough bodies in the box to, if you have a deflection, there's a body in there trying to, if you want to go inside, if you want to cross in, you're almost always guaranteed to have some kind of service in there, and you're almost always guaranteed to have a reception take on that ball. Commentators and journalists always talk about how the style of play allows players to roam around in the pitch, and honestly, the lack of better words, they do roam around in the pitch. And that is why the majority of the goals, almost 86% of their goals, come from open play. They're always running, they're always moving the ball, and they're always constantly changing how they set up in the formation. And that is how they are so exceptionally dangerous going forward. Now, we can also sit and talk about how well they defend, because they've only conceded 4 goals in the league so far, which is just a ridiculous number to think about. They always have their fullbacks covering the wingers and their center backs almost always in the middle, and their ideology of defending is also very fun, because they not necessarily do a man-to-man marking, but when they do, it's aggressive. If they're not imposing their very aggressive man-to-man marking, then they're often in the middle covering any ball that would possibly go into the middle and regain possession, which is what I mean by the 6-second rule of regaining possession. You almost set yourself up for success, and you set up yourself up for success in regaining possession, which will cause them to end up in multiple different shapes when they are on the back foot, most infamously them setting up in a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-4-1. They execute a 4-4-1 in the back foot really, really well, because they set up themselves in such a good position to counterattack even when they're defending, which again is a very fun thing to look at. But the art of it here is how they attack. How they attack and their style of football is just such a joy to watch. It's dynamite, it's dangerous, it's fast, and I would not be surprised to see, or to start seeing, male teams start looking at Barcelona here to implement and trying to almost mirror how they play. If you don't already watch Liga F, I highly recommend that you do. Dazan actually carries their games worldwide for free, so definitely get on that hype train. It's arguably one of the most competitive leagues, because right under Barcelona, that kind of like 6 teams under, are so close and are so competitive together, is that when you see Barcelona play them and almost toy with them, and that's really what attracted me to break down their style, because a lot of people refer to that Spanish league as a farmers league. It's far from it. Liga F is really, really interesting, and when you see Barcelona do what they do, it just makes it just so much more fun and just so much more crazy. I want to know your opinions and thoughts on Barcelona, how they attack. Did you like this kind of different content of video that I'm trying to cross over into? If you don't, let me know. If you do, also let me know. Share your thoughts, your opinions. I always love to see what you think about this stuff. As always, make sure you subscribe to me here on YouTube and follow me on Twitter. Now I will see you later.